The morning my luck began to fracture, I blamed the small things, because small things are easier to forgive than fate. The kettle clicked twice before boiling. My keycard refused the subway gate on the first tap. A delivery rider splashed a fan of puddle water onto my shoes, and I laughed, too loud, as if laughter could scrub bad omens clean. I had a shift at the municipal library's archive wing, the place where old maps and brittle newspapers went to be remembered by people who feared forgetting. I liked the archive because paper never pretends. It stains, it tears, it yellows, it tells you exactly what time does. My coworker Jay teased me for being early. "Mina, you arrive like you're afraid the building will vanish," he said. I shrugged. "Buildings vanish," I replied. "People sign papers and call it redevelopment." Jay rolled his eyes and handed me a stack of intake forms. "Then you'll love today," he said. "We got a donation from the Alabaster Foundation." Fancy. They sent their own courier. The name didn't mean anything yet. It would. At noon, the courier arrived. A woman in a charcoal suit with a neat braid and an expression that never fully relaxed. She carried a slim case and a clipboard, as if those two objects were the only things she trusted. "I'm Sarah Klein," she said, voice even. "I need to speak with Minna Park." People in the archive glanced at me, curious. I wiped dust from my fingertips and stepped forward. "That's me," I said. Sarah's gaze studied my face the way a scanner studies a barcode. "We have a matter of identity and inheritance," she said. "It's time-sensitive." I laughed once, because the word sounded like a bad drama. "Inheritance," I repeated. Sarah didn't laugh. She held out an envelope sealed with a pale blue wax stamp, shaped like a crane. "Please read," she said. The wax reminded me of something from childhood, paper cranes folded on a windowsill, a promise spoken too softly to be recorded. My throat went tight. I took the envelope and broke the seal. The letter inside was printed on thick paper with an embossed crest. Alabaster. It said, in careful language, that I was the biological child of Lucien Alabaster, founder of the Alabaster Foundation, and that due to a clerical irregularity, I had been misplaced in public records. It requested my presence at the Alabaster Glass House for a rectification meeting. At the bottom was a line that made my skin go cold. "We apologize for the administrative necessity of your absence." Administrative necessity. The phrase felt like a hand trying to cover my mouth. I should explain what absence meant in my life. I didn't have parents the way my classmates did, not in the tidy sense of two people who show up at school events and sign permission slips with matching last names. My father, if he ever existed, was a blank line. My mother was a ghost who left without leaving a forwarding address. I grew up with a guardian named Hainwell, a woman who ran a small print shop and wore exhaustion like perfume. She wasn't related to me, not by blood or law for the first few years. She had found me at a bus terminal when I was 6, clutching a plastic bag full of clothes and a notebook with my name written in someone else's handwriting. I remember the terminal's fluorescent lights buzzing like insects, the way my stomach hurt from hunger, the way people stepped around me as if I were a spill. Hainel crouched in front of me and asked, "Do you know where you're going?" I shook my head. She didn't say, "Poor thing." She didn't say, "Where are your parents?" She said, "Do you like paper?" I stared at her, confused. She reached into her pocket, pulled out a small square of bright red paper, and folded it into a crane with fast, precise motions. "If you keep your hands busy," she said, "your fear gets quieter." Then she held the crane out and said, "Come with me. I can't promise the world, but I can promise soup." That promise had been my anchor ever since. Hannel was strict, sharp-tongued, and allergic to sentimentality, but she never let me go hungry again. She also never called herself my mother. She called herself the person responsible, like responsibility was a job she'd accepted with clenched teeth. I loved her anyway. I didn't know that love could be administrative too. When I took the letter home that evening, Hainel read it twice without blinking. The print shop smelled of ink and warm paper, a scent that always made me feel safe. A wind chime near the door clinked softly as customers came and went. Hunnel set the letter down on the counter as if it were dirty. "Alabaster," she said. "They found you." "Found me?" I repeated. "Like I was lost property?" Hainel's jaw tightened. "You were," she said, "to them." I waited for her to look surprised, angry, emotional. Instead, she reached for the drawer where she kept her receipts and pulled out a slim file folder labeled Mina, Terminal. Inside were photocopies, old notices, a police report, a custody petition. I had never seen it. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked, voice small. Hunnell didn't meet my eyes. "Because you were a child," she said. "And because information is a knife. You don't hand a knife to a child and call it love." She tapped the alabaster letter. "They didn't misplace you by accident," she added. "They paid to erase you." The words made my stomach twist. "How do you know?" I whispered. Hanul finally looked at me, and her eyes were tired in a way I had never fully understood. "Because they came once before," she said. "A man in a suit. A woman like this, Sarah. They offered me money to sign a paper saying you were a runaway with no guardian." She swallowed. "I told them to go to hell. They threatened to call me a kidnapper. I got a lawyer. I filed for guardianship. I fought, and they disappeared." She exhaled sharply. "Now they're back because something has changed. People like them don't apologize unless the math forces it." I stared at the paper crane stamp on the envelope and felt a memory surface. A different crane, pale blue, left on our windowsill when I was 10, with a note that said, "Only one more year." I had assumed it was a prank. Hanul had burned it without comment. I suddenly understood why. I didn't want the alabasters. I didn't want their apology shaped like a legal memo. But I wanted answers, and I wanted to make sure they couldn't quietly erase me again. So I went to the glass house. Sarah picked me up in a silent car that smelled like lemon and money. She didn't speak until we passed the river where old factories had been replaced by luxury terraces. "There will be cameras," she said. "The family wants to present unity." "Unity," I echoed. "Does unity come with a price tag?" Sarah's lips twitched. "Everything does," she said, unexpectedly honest. The glass house rose on a hill like a translucent crown. A mansion built from steel and glass panels that reflected the sky so perfectly, it looked like the house was made of weather. A gate opened as we approached, and I felt like a specimen entering a display case. Inside, the main hall was bright, almost painfully, sunlight bouncing off polished surfaces. At the far end stood a man with silver hair and a posture like a straight line, Lucian Alabaster. Beside him was a woman in a white dress, her smile soft and practiced. Celeste, behind them, hovering like a shadow with good tailoring, stood a young woman about my age, wearing a fitted suit and a calm expression that didn't quite hide tension. "This is Ione," Lucian said. "Your sister." Ione's gaze met mine, and I saw something sharp there. Fear, calculation, maybe anger. Celeste stepped forward with open arms. "Mina," she said, voice trembling in a way that sounded rehearsed. "We've been searching for you." Lucian didn't move. He simply said, "You're here. Good. Let's talk." No hug, no tears, just business. Somehow that hurt less than Celeste's performance. They offered tea in cups too delicate to hold without feeling judged. Lucian spoke like a man used to controlling rooms. "There was an incident 23 years ago," he said. "A security breach. A threat to the Foundation. We made decisions to protect the organization." I stared at him. "You erased a child to protect your organization," I said. Celeste gasped softly, hand to her mouth. Ione's jaw tightened. Lucian's expression didn't change. "We relocated you," he said. "We ensured you were cared for." The words were sterile, like a disinfectant trying to clean blood off a floor. "By who?" I asked. "By a guardian," Lucian replied. "Hanuel," I said, and his gaze flicked for a fraction of a second. That was confirmation. He knew her name. He had always known. My hands shook around the teacup. "Why now?" I asked. Lucian folded his hands. "Because we are restructuring the Foundation," he said. "There are regulatory audits, public scrutiny, and because your mother—" He nodded toward Celeste. "She wants closure." Celeste's eyes filled. "I never stopped thinking about you," she whispered. I watched her face and felt nothing warm. Maybe once I would have begged for that sentence. Now it felt like a costume. "Closure for whom?" I asked. Lucian's gaze sharpened. "For the family," he said. "For the public narrative." There it was. Narrative. The word that makes pain into marketing. They slid a folder toward me. Inside were documents. A corrected birth certificate, a trust agreement, a non-disclosure clause, and a proposed interview schedule with journalists. My stomach clenched. "So you want me to become a story?" I said. "A lost daughter returned," A foundation redeemed. Ione spoke for the first time, voice controlled. You should understand, she said, that the foundation has saved thousands. If your reappearance destabilizes it, more people could suffer. Her words were almost identical to something Hanul used to say when she refused to buy me new shoes. We can't spend on wants when needs exist. But Ione's version was weaponized. You're telling me to be quiet for the greater good? I said. Ione's eyes cooled. I'm telling you consequences exist, she replied. Celeste reached for my hand. I pulled away. Lucien said, You may request compensation, as if he were offering a refund. I don't want compensation, I said. I want truth. Lucien's gaze hardened. Truth, he said, is not always beneficial. I laughed once, sharp. To whom? I asked. Sarah stood behind me, silent, but I felt her attention like a weight. I realized she wasn't just a courier. She was a witness, maybe a conscience, if people like Lucien believed in such things. I stayed at the glass house for 3 days because leaving without leverage felt like surrender. They gave me a guest room with a view of the city's glittering coastline, a coastline that used to be public before foundations bought the land for conservation. The bed was too soft. The silence felt hostile. At night, I folded paper cranes from hotel stationery, hands moving automatically, trying to quiet my fear the way Hanul had taught me. On the second night, someone knocked softly. I opened the door to find Ione standing there, hair unpinned, expression strained. Can we talk? She asked. I hesitated, then stepped aside. Ione entered like someone walking into enemy territory. She looked around at the cranes on my desk and swallowed. You fold cranes, she said. My mother used to fold them too. The word mother landed oddly. Ione's mother was Celeste. Celeste's performances were too polished to be real. Why are you here? I asked. Ione's shoulders lifted, then fell. Because I'm tired, she said. And because you're not the first erased person. I stared at her. What? Ione exhaled. The foundation is built on clean stories, she said. But there are things. People moved out of neighborhoods, files sealed, accidents that weren't accidents. I grew up believing we were heroes. Then I started reading internal memos. Her hands clenched. Lucien calls it harm minimization. He makes decisions like he's moving chess pieces, and everyone tells him he's saving the world. She looked at me. If you push too hard, he'll frame you as unstable and selfish. He'll say you're threatening flood relief projects. I studied her face. Are you warning me? I asked. Or threatening me? Ione flinched. Warning, she said. And asking. Asking what? I asked. Ione swallowed. Asking you to be careful, she said. And maybe to help me stop him without burning everything down. I almost laughed. A sister I'd just met asking for alliance, but her exhaustion looked real. And I had learned from Hanul that tired people sometimes tell the truth because lying requires extra energy. The next morning, Lucien announced a press rehearsal. They wanted me on stage with him and Celeste, smiling beneath a banner that read Alabaster. Transparency in action. The irony made my teeth itch. In the rehearsal hall, a PR consultant adjusted my posture, told me to tilt my chin, told me to look grateful. The public loves redemption, she said. Give them a tear. I stared at her. My tears aren't for sale, I said. The consultant blinked, offended, as if I'd refused to donate to charity. Lucien approached, voice low. You will cooperate, he said, not a request. You're not my father, I replied. The words tasted strange, because biologically he was. But fatherhood is not a blood test. Lucien's eyes narrowed. I gave you life, he said. Hanul gave me soup, I replied. Lucien's jaw tightened. Celeste stepped in, palms open. Sweetheart, she whispered. Please, we can talk privately. Don't embarrass us. Embarrass us, not hurt us, not betrayed us. Embarrass. That was what mattered. I saw, suddenly, the shape of their fear. They were terrified not of losing me, but of losing control of the story. I also saw something else. In the corner of the hall, a cameraman adjusted his lens, and beside him stood a group of schoolchildren in matching raincoats, here for a foundation tour. Their teacher tried to corral them. One small boy wriggled free, fascinated by the lights, and ran toward the stage edge. For a second, no one noticed. The boy's shoelace caught on a cable, and he stumbled toward a stairwell opening that led to the backstage equipment pit. My body moved before my mind did. I lunged, grabbed his raincoat, yanked him back. He hit my shoulder, crying, but safe. The teacher screamed and rushed over. The PR consultant went pale. Lucien stared at the pit like he'd just seen a crack in glass. The boy clung to me, shaking. I crouched and said, "Breathe. You're okay." The words came automatically, like a script I'd practiced in my own childhood whenever panic threatened to swallow me. The boy's eyes met mine. They were wide, scared, trusting. In that moment, I felt the old, familiar ache. The instinct to protect someone smaller, even when the world had never protected me. It wasn't heroism, it was reflex. It was the only kind of goodness I trusted. The incident became headline bait within an hour. A returned daughter. Saving a child at a foundation event, perfect narrative fuel. Lucien's team spun it as proof of alabaster values. They edited footage to show Lucien rushing forward, though he had stood frozen. Celeste's face was captured in soft concern, though she had been more worried about her dress. The story spread anyway. People praised me. People wrote that blood will tell. I wanted to scream that blood doesn't teach you to pull a child back from a pit. Fear does. Hunger does. Being left behind does. That night, Hanul called, voice sharp. "I saw the news," she said. "Don't let them turn your reflex into their brand." I swallowed. "They already are," I said. Hanul's silence crackled through the line. "Then you do what you do best," she said. "You archive. You keep records. You make truth hard to erase." I stared at the paper cranes on my desk, their wings casting small shadows. "How?" I whispered. Hanul exhaled. "Find the document they fear most," she said, "and put it where people can't unsee it." Ione brought me the first thread of that document the next day. She slipped into the archive room of the glass house, yes. They had their own private archive, of course, and handed me a keycard with trembling fingers. "The compliance vault," she whispered. "Lucien keeps sealed files there." She looked at me like she was offering me a knife and hoping I wouldn't cut her. "Why are you helping?" I asked. Ione's eyes glistened, and for the first time her control cracked. "Because I lived my whole life in a house made of glass," she said, "and glass shows every crack when the light hits it. I'm tired of pretending the cracks aren't there." I took the keycard. My hands were steady. I didn't love crime. I loved evidence. That night, when the glass house slept, I walked through hallways that reflected my shape a dozen times, like the house was trying to multiply me into something manageable. The compliance vault door opened with a soft beep. Inside, shelves held labeled binders, each one a story someone had tried to keep quiet. I pulled files at random, scanning for patterns, relocation agreements, confidentiality payouts, incident mitigation plans. Then I found a binder stamped with the same crane seal as my envelope. Title: Project Crane. Record correction. My throat tightened. I opened it and saw my own name in spreadsheets, along with terms like disposition, transferred to proxy guardian, media risk, minimized biological mother, cooperative under NDA. My stomach churned. Celeste hadn't been a grieving mother. She had been a signer, a participant. There were invoices, too. Payments routed through shell charities to fund community guardians who would take children and never ask questions. Hanul's name appeared once, next to a note. Guardian refused. Escalation failed. Monitoring paused due to visibility risk. They had watched us. They had known where I lived. They had decided I wasn't worth the trouble until now. My vision blurred with anger. I took photos of every page, careful, methodical, hands moving like I was scanning fragile newspapers. Then, deeper in the binder, I found something worse. A list labeled collateral events. It included names of other children, kids who had disappeared into foster systems after foundation, incidents, their identities amended for security. Some had notes, status unknown. My skin went cold. This wasn't just about me. It was about a machine that erased inconvenient lives and called it protection. I didn't sleep. I sat on the floor with my back against the vault wall and listened to my own breathing. I thought of the boy in the raincoat, almost falling. I thought of my 6-year-old self in the terminal, almost invisible. I thought of Hanul burning that pale blue crane and refusing to explain because explanations can shatter children. I wanted to smash every glass panel in the house. Instead, I did what Hanul taught me. I organized. I created an index. I tagged pages. I wrote a summary like an archivist. Who, what, when, and which signatures. Ione returned at dawn, eyes red from lack of sleep. "Did you find something?" she whispered. I looked at her and said, "I found a graveyard made of paperwork." Ione's face drained of color. "What do we do?" she asked. I answered, "We make it public in a way Lucien can't spin." Ione swallowed. "He'll destroy us," she whispered. I thought of Hanul, who had fought a legal battle while running a print shop and feeding a child who wasn't hers. "He can try," I said, "but truth isn't as fragile as he thinks. Glass is." We needed a stage bigger than the glass house. The Foundation's annual Winter Relief Gala was in 2 nights, an event broadcast live, packed with donors and politicians, featuring a keynote about ethical resilience. Lucien would be there, smiling, accepting applause. Celeste would wear white. Ione would stand beside him as the chosen successor, and I would be introduced as the miraculous returned daughter. Proof that alabaster harms no one. Perfect. We planned like thieves, but we weren't stealing. We were returning what had been taken. Names. Ione arranged access to the gala's media console through Sarah Klein, who, to my surprise, didn't refuse. When I confronted Sarah in a quiet corridor and asked why she kept helping, her face tightened. "Because I used to believe in the mission," she said. "And because I've seen too many administrative necessities become coffins." She handed me a small drive and said, "This will override their slideshow for exactly 90 seconds before they can cut it. Make it count." 90 seconds. That was both nothing and everything. I prepared a compressed video. Scanned pages of Project Crane, signatures highlighted, a scrolling list of the other children's names, and a final frame. "If you were erased, contact this secure line." We set up a hotline through a journalist Jay trusted, someone outside the Foundation's reach. It wasn't perfect, but it was a door. The gala hall glittered like a frozen ocean. Chandeliers threw light across tuxedos, diamonds, and the smooth faces of people who believed generosity absolved them. I wore a simple black dress and kept my hands steady by folding an invisible crane in my mind. Hanul texted once, "Keep your wings sharp." Ione stood near the stage, face composed. Celeste approached me with a soft smile. "Tonight can be healing," she whispered. I looked at her and said, "Healing requires truth." Celeste's smile faltered, then returned like a mask being adjusted. Lucien took the stage to applause. "We gather," he said, "to celebrate transparency and resilience." The crowd clapped. The cameras panned. He gestured toward me. "My daughter Mina has returned to us," he said. "A miracle." The word miracle tasted bitter. Then he said, "And Ione, our devoted successor, embodies our values." Iona's posture stayed rigid, like a statue holding back an earthquake. Lucien began his speech about flood relief, about climate refugees, about building safe zones. He called it compassion. He never once mentioned that safe zones are sometimes built by pushing poor people out of their homes. He never once mentioned that some children become inconvenient to the clean story. When he reached the climax, he said the line his team had scripted, "We swear our work harms no one. Swear." The word made my pulse spike. He didn't know I had learned to treat oaths as leverage. My cue. I met Sierra's eyes across the hall. She nodded once. Ione's hand trembled slightly at her side. I walked toward the stage with the confidence of someone who has already been erased and knows there's nothing left to fear from reputation. Security started to step forward, but the cameras were already tracking me, hungry for drama. I took the spare microphone and said, "I'd like to add something to Lucien's oath." Lucien's smile tightened. "Mina," he murmured. "Not now." "Now," I said into the mic, "is the only time you can't hide." I nodded to the media console. The screen behind Lucien flickered. His polished Foundation video vanished. In its place appeared a scanned page labeled Project Crane. Record correction, with Lucien's signature highlighted. A gasp rolled through the hall. The video continued. Celeste's signature, highlighted. Then the spreadsheet listing transferred children. Names scrolled, too many to count. The crowd's murmurs turned to shock, then to anger. Lucien's face went pale. He reached toward the console, but Sarah blocked a technician with her body, buying seconds. 90 seconds felt like an eternity under bright lights. I kept speaking over the visuals, voice steady. "You erased children to protect your brand," I said. "You called it administrative necessity. You built a foundation on the idea that some lives are expendable, so others can be saved. That's not rescue. That's selection. Celeste tried to speak, tears rising. I didn't let her hijack the moment with emotion. If you were erased, I said, the line on the screen is open. Tell your story. Get your name back. The final frame flashed. Then the screen went black as technicians yanked cables. The hall erupted into chaos. Journalists surged forward. Donors shouted. Lucien grabbed my arm, gripped tight. You have no idea what you've done, he hissed. I looked at his hand on my skin and said, loud enough for nearby microphones, you did it first. He released me as if burned. After the gala, the Foundation's lawyers moved like a swarm. They filed injunctions, threatened defamation suits, accused me of hacking, claimed the documents were misinterpreted. They tried to bury the story under language the way you bury a body under flowers. But the names had already spread. People began calling the hotline. Some were prank calls. Many weren't. A woman cried and said her brother had vanished from a foster system after a Foundation-funded incident at a shelter. A man whispered that he had been renamed at 14 and told never to ask questions. A former social worker provided screenshots of vanished case files. Each call was a paper crane unfolding into a truth. Jay, my coworker, helped manage the archive of testimonies because he understood metadata and grief. This is bigger than your family, he said quietly. This is a system. I nodded. I know, I said. That's why I'm not stopping. Lucien tried a different tactic. He offered me a private meeting. We can resolve this without destroying the Foundation, his message said. Resolve, another word that means bury. I agreed to meet only if the conversation was recorded and if an independent mediator attended. He hated those conditions, which was the point. The meeting happened in a city office tower, sterile and bright. Lucien arrived without Celeste, without Ione, only Sarah, who looked like she hadn't slept. You've made enemies, Lucien said immediately. You've endangered our relief projects. I leaned back. Your projects endangered children, I replied. Lucien's eyes hardened. We made choices under threat, he said. There were people who wanted to destroy the Foundation. If information leaked, donors would flee, and thousands would drown without our infrastructure. He spoke like a man reciting a moral equation that always ended with him as savior. So you sacrificed children to save donors' feelings, I said. Lucien's jaw clenched. I didn't sacrifice, he snapped. I relocated. I ensured. You ensured silence, I interrupted. You ensured you could stand on stage and say you harm no one. Lucien's gaze flicked to the recorder on the table, then away. Sarah watched him with something like disgust. Lucien exhaled. What do you want? He asked. That question again, the powerful asking the inconvenient to name a price. I said, a public admission. A full external audit of Project Crane. Restitution funds controlled by an independent committee that includes survivors. And a path for everyone erased to reclaim their legal identities without penalty. Lucien stared as if I'd asked him to carve out his heart. Impossible, he said. Expensive, I corrected. Lucien's mouth tightened. You'll bankrupt us, he said. Then you shouldn't have built your house on stolen names, I replied. Sarah inhaled sharply, like she'd been holding breath for years. Lucien stood abruptly. I will fight you, he said. Do, I replied. The truth has more stamina than your reputation. The fight lasted months. Courts moved slowly, but stories moved fast. Investigative journalists published deep dives. Regulators opened hearings. The Foundation's donors panicked and demanded accountability. Some withdrew money. Others doubled down, claiming it was a smear campaign. Politics tried to eat the scandal the way it eats everything, by turning it into partisan noise. Through it all, Hanul stayed quiet, running her print shop, watching the chaos like someone who has survived bigger storms. When she finally visited me in the city, she carried a box of soup and a stack of printed flyers. The flyers read, Were you reassigned? Your name matters. Call this line. She set them on my table and said, Paper can travel places you can't. My throat tightened. Why did you keep me? I asked suddenly. The question I had swallowed for years. Hanel's hands paused over the soup lid. She didn't answer right away. Then she said, Because you looked at that crane like it was the first beautiful thing you'd ever been offered. And because I was tired of watching children be treated like mistakes. She exhaled. Also because I was lonely. The admission was small, almost invisible, but it hit me harder than Lucien's speeches. Hanul's love was not a performance. It was a choice repeated daily, even when she complained, even when she threatened to leave, even when she couldn't afford softness. I reached across the table and touched her hand. Hanul flinched, then didn't pull away. "I'm sorry I made your life harder," I whispered. Hanul snorted. "You didn't," she said. "The world did. You just survived loud enough for people to hear." One day, a call came through the hotline from a voice that made my blood turn to ice. "Celeste." She spoke quietly, no tears. "Mina," she said, "they're going to arrest Ione." My stomach dropped. "For what?" I asked. Celeste's breath shook. "For leaking," she whispered. "They found the access logs. Lucien is blaming her. He says she betrayed him." I clenched my fist. "Ione did betray him," I said. "She betrayed his machine. That's not a crime." Celeste sounded like she was drowning. "I signed those papers," she said. "I told myself I was protecting you. I told myself you'd be safer out of the spotlight. I was wrong." Her voice cracked, finally real. "If they arrest Ione, it will destroy her, and it will make the other erased people afraid to speak." I closed my eyes. I didn't want to help Celeste, but Ione had helped me, and debt is real. "Send me everything you have," I said. "Every email, every signature trail, every note that proves Lucien ordered it. If we're going to protect Ione, we need to shift the blame to where it belongs." Celeste whispered, "Thank you," as if gratitude could erase years. I didn't respond to the thank you. I responded to the facts. We received a data dump that night. Internal directives, Lucien's approvals, memos instructing staff to modify records. It was enough to create a chain of command. It was also proof that Celeste had known more than she admitted. The truth rarely comes pure. It comes mixed with self-preservation. Still, mixed truth can burn. At the hearing, Ione testified with her back straight, and her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles turned white. She didn't cry. She said, "I believed my father's mission was moral. Then I learned it depended on erasing people. I refused to inherit a clean empire built on dirty silence." Lucien sat behind his lawyers, face rigid. When the committee asked him about Project Crane, he tried to reframe it as a security protocol. Then a senator asked, "Did you authorize the death designation of your biological child?" The room went silent. Lucien's jaw worked. He looked at the microphones, the cameras, the eyes. He realized his usual strategy controlling narrative was failing because the narrative had become paperwork. Under oath, he couldn't float. He said, "Yes." The word was small. It still landed like a hammer. Gasps spread through the audience. Hanul watched from the back row, arms crossed, expression unreadable. Ione exhaled, a shaky release. Celeste covered her mouth. Lucien continued, "I believed it was necessary." Necessary. That word again. The senator leaned forward. "Necessary for whom?" she asked. Lucien's eyes flicked, calculating. For the first time, he had no beautiful answer. He stammered. The committee pressed. The cameras captured every crack. The glass house, built to reflect perfection, was reflecting collapse. The final ruling didn't erase the harm, but it changed the system's math. Regulators forced the Foundation to release Project Crane files to an independent oversight board. The court ordered identity restoration pathways for those affected. A restitution fund was created with survivor representation, not donor control. Lucien resigned under pressure, though he framed it as stepping aside for the mission. Celeste entered a witness protection-like arrangement, because threats arrived from people who had benefited from the secrecy network. Ione avoided prison by cooperating fully, but the label trader followed her online. She stopped reading comments and started building an archive of survivor stories with Jay and me. We called it the Crane Registry. The archive wasn't glamorous. It was spreadsheets, scanned affidavits, audio recordings, and a map of vanished records. It was the opposite of a fairy tale. It was, however, a way for people to reclaim their names. One afternoon, a man in his 40s visited the archive room. He held a crumpled flyer Hanul had printed. "I was reassigned in 1999, he said, voice shaking. "I thought it was normal. I thought I didn't deserve a past." I handed him a chair and said, "Sit. We'll find your paper trail." His eyes filled. "Can paper really bring back a life?" he whispered. I thought of the boy in the raincoat, of Hanul's soup, Avione's trembling hands in the vault. Paper can't bring back time, I said, but it can bring back truth. And truth can change what happens next. The backlash didn't stay in courtrooms. It followed us into daily life the way smoke follows a fire you can't see yet. One evening, the print shop's front window shattered with a sound like a gunshot. Customers screamed. Hannel didn't. She walked to the glass, looked at the jagged hole, then bent and picked up the rock that had done it. Taped to the rock was a note printed the color of bruised lavender. Stop digging or we'll bury you properly. The handwriting was neat, almost elegant, which made it worse. Hannel held the note for a long second, then tossed it into the trash like it was junk mail. They're trying to scare you, I said, heart thudding. They're trying to scare us, Hannel corrected, and they chose the wrong shop. She called a glazier, then called the local news station, and offered them the note. If they want to threaten me, she muttered, they can do it where everyone can see. Publicity is a shield when you can't afford bodyguards. After the window incident, we installed cameras and motion lights, and Hannel made a habit of carrying a heavy metal stapler in her apron pocket like a weapon of office supplies. It should have been funny. It wasn't. The threats escalated online too. Anonymous accounts posting my childhood terminal photo, calling me a fraud, claiming Hannel was a trafficker. A false police tip sent officers to the shop one afternoon. They asked Hannel for papers, their faces stiff with suspicion. Hannel didn't argue. She placed her guardianship decree on the counter, then placed the hearing transcript beside it, then placed a printed timeline of Project Crane on top, all neatly aligned like she was typesetting reality. The officers read, their expressions shifting from suspicion to discomfort. We got a call, one muttered. Hannel shrugged. People call in lies when the truth scares them, she said. When they left, she locked the door and leaned against it, breathing hard. For the first time, I saw how heavy it had been for her all these years to be the person responsible, while the world assumed she was the problem. I wanted to hug her. I didn't, because Hannel doesn't like being held. So I did the next best thing. I made her a cup of tea and sat nearby, present, quiet, unerasable. The Crane registry grew faster than we could organize. Survivors arrived in person, some carrying plastic folders, some carrying nothing but a story they'd rehearsed in silence for decades. Many were terrified of being re-erased. We built protocols, intake interviews, consent forms, trauma-informed breaks, encrypted backups in multiple locations, paper copies stored in the library's climate vault. Jay joked that we were creating an archive that could survive a flood and a lawsuit. Make it 2 lawsuits, I said. We partnered with pro bono lawyers and social workers who understood that restored identity isn't just a name on paper. It's access to healthcare, to education records, to inheritance disputes, to the right to not feel like a ghost. Each case was different. Each case was a small battle against the idea that bureaucracy is neutral. Bureaucracy is a weapon. You can tell by how often it aims at the poor. Lucien's allies tried to dismantle us by draining our credibility. A glossy documentary appeared on a streaming platform titled The Miracle of Alabaster: How One Foundation Changed the Coast. In the first cut, Project Crane was mentioned only as a misunderstood safety protocol, and I was framed as an angry daughter with unresolved abandonment trauma. They used clips of me looking tense, spliced out of context, and soft music to make me seem unstable. The film was professionally manipulative, the kind of manipulation that makes viewers feel kind while doubting victims. I watched it once and felt my hands shake with rage. Then I did what archives do. I corrected the record. We released a side-by-side timeline with raw footage from the gala, scanned signatures, and full hearing excerpts. We posted it on every platform, in multiple languages, with citations. We taught volunteers how to mirror the files so takedowns couldn't erase them. The documentary's producer sent a cease and desist. Hannel framed it and hung it in the shop like art. The closest Lucien came to breaking me wasn't through threats. It was through quiet cruelty aimed at my sense of worth. He arranged for an anonymous op-ed to circulate, supposedly by a flood relief worker, saying that my scandal had frozen donations and cost lives. The op-ed was a moral trap. If I fought, I was selfish. If I stopped, I was complicit. For 2 nights I didn't sleep, imagining drowning neighborhoods, imagining my choices rippling into harm. On the 3rd day, Sarah Klein sent me a message with 2 attachments. The op-ed's metadata tracing it to a PR firm on Alabaster's payroll, and internal emails showing donors were never frozen, only redirected into emergency reserves to pressure regulators. I stared at the files until my eyes burned. Lucien wasn't worried about flood victims. He was worried about losing his halo. I forwarded the proof to the journalist who'd been most skeptical of me. The next morning, the op-ed was exposed as manufactured empathy. The backlash shifted. People began to understand that even compassion can be forged when reputation is the currency. In the middle of all this, Hainel got sick. Not dramatically, not with a collapse in a courtroom, but with the slow betrayal of a cough that wouldn't leave. She hid it for weeks, blaming winter air and shop dust. I noticed because Hainel never complains twice about the same thing unless it matters. One night I found her sitting on the print shop floor, back against the paper shelves, hand pressed to her ribs, breathing shallow. Panic rose in me like a tide. I knelt and said, "We're going to the clinic." Hainel tried to wave me off. "Don't fuss," she rasped. You're not allowed to disappear," I said, and the words startled both of us. Hainel's eyes widened, then softened, just a little. At the clinic, the doctor said it was pneumonia, treatable, but warned that stress had weakened her. I sat beside Hainel's bed in a small ward that smelled of antiseptic and boiled rice. She slept, face drawn. I realized with a sudden ache that the person who had saved me from abandonment was now vulnerable, and there was no foundation in the world that could repay that debt properly. So I did the only thing I could. I stayed. I handled the shop orders. I folded cranes from prescription pamphlets and left them on her bedside tray. When she woke, she scowled at the cranes. "Waste of paper," she muttered. I smiled. "It's just paper," I said, "but it's also proof you're still here." Hainel looked away, and I saw her blink fast, as if irritated by moisture. While Hainel recovered, the registry faced its most delicate case. A teenage girl named Yara, who had been reassigned at birth and raised by a couple who never told her. She discovered her original name in a sealed envelope hidden behind a kitchen clock. When her adoptive parents confronted her, they panicked and called the foundation, believing the foundation had the authority to fix the situation. 2 days later, Yara vanished from school. Her social accounts went dark. Her friends assumed she'd been transferred. The pattern made my skin crawl. We traced her last known location to a foundation-funded youth shelter. Sarah confirmed, quietly, that a security pickup had been authorized by a manager loyal to Lucien. Lucien may have resigned publicly, but his network still had hands. Ione insisted on coming with me to the shelter. "If they see me," she said, "they might hesitate." We arrived with a lawyer, a journalist, and 2 social workers, visibility as armor. At the shelter, staff tried to block us, citing confidentiality. I asked, "Is confidentiality protecting Yara, or protecting the people who took her?" No one answered. The journalist lifted a camera. The lawyer cited the court order on identity restoration. The staff's resistance weakened under light. Finally, a door opened, and Yara stepped out, eyes red, shoulders hunched, clutching a paper bag of belongings. When she saw us, her face crumpled. "They said I'd get in trouble for asking," she whispered. I stepped closer, careful, and said, "You don't get in trouble for existing." Yara shook, tears spilling. Ione stood behind me like a quiet shield. We took Yara to a safe placement, then added her case to the registry with extra protections. Later, in the car, Ione stared out the window and said, voice thin, "This is what I helped build." I answered, "Then help unbuild it." She nodded, jaw clenched. That was the only apology I needed. A year after the scandal, I returned to the bus terminal where Hainel had found me. The lights were still buzzing. People still hurried past each other like collisions were inevitable. I stood near the same bench, now replaced with newer plastic, and folded a paper crane from a receipt I'd found in my pocket. The crane was small, imperfect, but it held its shape. Hainel stood beside me, hands in her coat pockets, pretending she didn't care about the symbolism. Ione waited a few steps away, giving us space, her posture less rigid than before. Jay filmed quietly for the archive, not for a documentary. "Do you feel like you belong anywhere now?" Hainel asked suddenly, voice low. I stared at the terminal's revolving doors. I thought of the glass house and its reflective walls, of Lucien's cold eyes, of Celeste's late truth, of the children's names scrolling on a screen for 90 seconds. That changed everything. I thought of the print shop's warm paper scent. "I don't belong to them," I said. I belong to the people who kept me alive, and to the people whose names were returning. Hanul nodded once, as if that was the only acceptable answer. Ione stepped closer and held out a small square of pale blue paper. For you, she said quietly. No seal, no stamp, no conditions. I took it. The paper was plain, unbranded, honest. I folded it into a crane and set it on the bench. The crane faced the doors, as if ready to travel. What does return mean now? Jay asked softly from behind the camera. I looked at the crane, then at Hanul, then at Ione. Return, I said, means bringing back what was stolen. Names, records, choice.